Have you ever noticed how a single thought can pull you out of the present moment and into a story that hasn't happened yet? You're sitting quietly, maybe feeling the weight of your body against the chair, and then a thought arrives. Something you want, something you wish were different. And suddenly, you're no longer here. You're somewhere else entirely, living in a future that doesn't exist, or replaying a past that's already gone. This is where we begin today. Not with grand philosophy, but with this small, ordinary movement of mind that happens dozens of times each day, mostly without our noticing. The Buddha called this movement tanha. Sometimes it's translated as craving, sometimes as thirst. Both words point to the same experience, this reaching quality of mind that leans toward what it wants and away from what it doesn't want. It's so subtle that we often miss it entirely. We think we're just thinking, just planning, just hoping. But underneath these thoughts is a pulling sensation, like a current beneath still water. Imagine for a moment that you're standing at the edge of a river. The water looks calm on the surface, but there's a current running through it. If you step in, you'll feel it immediately, the way it wants to carry you downstream. You don't have to fight it. You don't even have to move. Just by standing in the water, you feel the constant pressure of that current against your legs. This is what craving feels like in the mind. A steady pressure, a subtle pull. It's there when you check your phone without meaning to. It's there when you reach for a second, serving even though you're full. It's there in the small sigh of disappointment when something doesn't go the way you hoped. The current is always moving, always pulling, and we spend most of our lives standing in it without realizing we're wet. Take a breath now. Feel the air move into your body and then release. Notice if there's any wanting in this moment. Not dramatic wanting, just the quiet kind. The wanting for this script to give you something. The wanting for your body to feel more comfortable. The wanting for tomorrow to be easier than today. See if you can sense that reaching quality, even if it's very faint. The second noble truth isn't a judgment about this reaching, it's an observation. The Buddha isn't saying you're bad for wanting things. He's pointing at something much simpler and much more interesting. This reaching itself, this constant leaning toward and away, this is what creates the texture of suffering in our lives. Not the big catastrophes, not the dramatic losses. Those are painful, yes, but they're not what the Buddha is pointing to. He's pointing to something quieter. The low hum of dissatisfaction that runs underneath even present experiences. The way we can't quite settle. The way peace always feels just one condition away. You get what you wanted, and for a moment the current stops. The reaching relaxes. There's a brief sense of arrival. But then, so quickly you might miss it, the current starts again. Now you want to keep what you have. Or you notice it's not quite as satisfying as you imagined. Or you start reaching toward the next thing. The river never stops flowing. The current never says, enough, you can rest now. This is why the Buddha used the word thirst. When you're thirsty, drinking water feels like the answer. And it is for a moment. But then thirst returns. You'll be thirsty again tomorrow, and the day after that. Thirst is not a problem to be solved once and for all. It's a condition that keeps arising. But here's what makes this teaching so practical, so immediate. You don't have to believe anything to explore it. You don't have to accept it on faith. You can simply look. Right now, in this moment, you can feel the current of wanting if you bring your attention close enough. It's there in the quality of your breath, in the tension in your shoulders, in the way your mind keeps planning the next moment instead of meeting this one. The question isn't whether craving is present. The question is, can you feel it? Can you sense that reaching quality before it pulls you downstream? Can you stand at the edge of the river and notice the current without stepping in? This is where the practice begins, not with trying to stop wanting, not with pushing the current away, but with feeling it, knowing it, seeing how it moves. There's a particular feeling that comes after finishing something you've looked forward to, a meal you enjoyed, a conversation that felt warm, a moment of rest after a long day. And somewhere in that feeling, almost before you've registered it, the mind is already elsewhere, already asking what comes next. This is where craving lives. Not in the loud wanting of things we don't have, but in the quiet reaching that happens even when we do. The Buddha described craving as the origin of suffering. He called it a thirst that leads from birth to birth, accompanied by delight and greed. Not just desire, but a particular kind of restlessness. A movement toward the next thing that never quite stops, even when this thing is still here. You can see it in small moments. You're drinking your morning tea, and before the cup is empty, you're thinking about what you need to do after. You're talking with someone, and while they're still speaking, part of you is already composing your reply. You finish one task and immediately reach for the next, as though pausing would mean something is wrong. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. The first sip seems to promise relief. There's a sensation, a taste, a brief occupation of the mouth. But it doesn't satisfy. It can't. And so you drink again, and the thirst grows sharper. Each sip creates the conditions for more wanting. This is not about denying yourself pleasure. It's not about refusing what you enjoy. It's about noticing what happens in the space between enjoying and needing more. That small, almost invisible moment when satisfaction turns into grasping. You might notice it after eating. The meal was good. Your body feels nourished. And yet there's a pull toward dessert, or toward checking your phone, or toward filling the silence that's opened up. The craving isn't for food anymore, it's for continuation, for the next hit of sensation or distraction or comfort. Or you might notice it in rest itself. You sit down after a long stretch of work, and instead of simply sitting, the mind begins to plan, to review, to wonder if you're resting correctly or long enough, or if you should be doing something else instead. Even rest becomes a task to complete, so you can move on to the next thing. The saltwater metaphor works because it shows how craving perpetuates itself. The very thing you reach for to ease the discomfort becomes the cause of more discomfort. Not because the thing itself is bad, but because the reaching never stops. The thirst is in the reaching, not in what you're reaching for. This is what the Buddha meant by craving leading from birth to birth. It's not just about literal rebirth in a cosmological sense. It's about the constant birth of new wanting, new dissatisfaction, new incompleteness. One desire is satisfied and another is born in its place. The cycle continues because we haven't yet seen the mechanism clearly. So the practice here is simple, though not always easy. Notice one moment today when satisfaction turns into wanting more, not to stop it, not to fix it, just to see it clearly. You might catch it in the middle of a conversation that's going well, when the mind suddenly wants it to go better, or to last longer, or to mean something more. You might catch it at the end of a piece of work you're proud of, when instead of letting yourself feel that pride, you immediately start thinking about the next project, the next achievement, the next proof of your worth. You might catch it in the body, a stretch that feels good, and then the impulse to stretch more, harder, differently. A breath that lands softly, and then the thought that you should be breathing more mindfully, more deeply, more like someone who really knows how to meditate. The moment you notice this, you're already outside the cycle, even if just for a second. You're seeing the salt water for what it is. You're feeling the difference between the satisfaction that was already there and the craving that arose to replace it. This noticing doesn't require you to change anything. You might still reach for the next thing. You might still drink the salt water. But now there's awareness in it. Now you can feel the texture of the reaching itself, separate from what you're reaching toward. And in that feeling, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough that you begin to recognize the pattern, the quiet way craving moves, the way it disguises itself as need, as ambition, as care, as anything other than what it is, a thirst that creates more thirst. When you can feel that difference, even once you've touched something the Buddha pointed to. The origin of suffering isn't out there in the world. It's in this reaching. This turning away from what is toward what might be next. And it's been happening so quietly, so constantly, that you've mistaken it for how life simply is. There is a moment just after something pleasant ends when the mind does something so quick you might miss it. A good meal finishes. A conversation that made you feel seen comes to a close. The warmth of lying in morning sun fades as you stand up to begin the day. Right there, in that small gap, the mind reaches backward. It wants that feeling again, not later, not in some vague future. Now. This reaching is so familiar, it feels like nothing at all. But the Buddha pointed to it with great care. He called it tanha, which is sometimes translated as craving, sometimes as thirst. The image is precise. Thirst does not ask politely. It does not wait for the right moment. It pulls. What makes this reaching so hard to see is that it does not announce itself. There is no dramatic moment when you decide to crave. It simply happens. The pleasant thing ends, and before you have even noticed the ending, the mind is already leaning toward repetition, already planning, already comparing this moment to that one, already feeling the faint ache of its absence. A fish that returns to the same bait again and again does not think it is trapped. It remembers the taste. It remembers the small burst of satisfaction. So when the bait appears once more, the fish moves toward it with something like recognition. This is familiar. This is good. The hook is hidden in what feels most natural. We do this with pleasant experiences in ways that seem harmless at first. You have a good cup of coffee in the morning, and the next day you want it again. Not just coffee, that feeling. You have an evening where everything feels easy with someone you love, and then you start trying to recreate it. Same restaurant, same walk, same topic of conversation. But the second time is never quite the same, because the first time was not a formula. It was a set of conditions that arose and passed. This is where craving begins its quiet work. The pleasant experience itself is not the problem. The problem is what the mind does with it afterward. It takes something that was whole in itself and turns it into a template, a demand, a measurement against which all future moments will be judged. You might notice this most clearly with small pleasures. A song that moved you the first time becomes something you play again and again, trying to catch that first feeling. But the feeling does not come back the same way, so you play it more. You adjust the volume. You try it in different rooms, at different times of day. The song has not changed. What has changed is that you are no longer listening. You are chasing. Attachment to what is pleasant binds us. We mistake the rope for safety. The rope feels like connection, like loyalty, like knowing what we love. But if you watch closely, you will see that the rope is also a leash. It keeps you circling back. It makes you smaller. It tells you that this one thing, this one experience, holds something you cannot find anywhere else. The teaching is not to reject pleasure. It is to see what happens after. To notice the moment when enjoyment turns into grasping, when presence turns into planning. This is where the practice becomes very simple. After something pleasant ends, pause. Do not move toward the next thing yet. Do not start replaying it in your mind or figuring out how to make it happen again. Just pause. Notice what the mind does next. Does it reach backward? Does it start comparing? Does it feel a faint sense of loss, even though nothing has actually been lost? You do not need to stop the reaching. You do not need to scold yourself for wanting. Just see it. The fish sees the bait and moves toward it because it does not see the hook. But if the fish could pause, could notice the pattern, it might see that the bait always comes with a cost. The taste is real. The trap is also real. This noticing does not have to be dramatic. You finish a conversation that felt good. You notice the small pull to text that person again right away to keep the feeling going. You do not act on it immediately, you just see it. You see that the mind wants to turn a moment into a possession. Or you have a quiet morning where everything feels aligned, the light is soft, your body feels rested. The tea tastes the way tea should taste. And then, without deciding to, you start thinking about how to make tomorrow morning the same. You are already planning, already grasping. The present moment has become a blueprint. When you pause and notice this, you are not stopping pleasure. You are stopping the transformation of pleasure into pursuit. You are letting the present thing remain what it was. A moment that arose, existed fully, and passed. The mind will want to argue. It will say that wanting good things again is natural, is human, is how we build a life. And there is truth in that. But watch what happens when the wanting becomes a demand. Watch what happens when you cannot let the moment complete itself. The pattern becomes visible not all at once, but in small glimpses. You see it once and forget. You see it again and recognize it. Over time, you begin to notice the exact instant when enjoyment tips into craving. That instant is so brief, but it changes everything that follows. There is a kind of tiredness that comes not from doing too much, but from resisting what is already here. You can feel it in the tightness behind your eyes when someone speaks and you wish they would stop. You can feel it in your shoulders when the noise from the street keeps going. You can feel it in the way your whole body braces when you remember something you said yesterday that you wish you could unsay. This is aversion. It is craving's twin. Where craving reaches forward, aversion pushes away. But the effort is the same. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater. At first it seems simple. You press down and the ball stays under the surface. But it takes constant pressure. Your arms begin to ache. The ball keeps trying to rise. You have to stay vigilant, adjusting your grip, leaning your weight into it. The longer you hold it down, the more tired you become. And the moment you stop pressing, the ball bursts upward. This is what we do with discomfort. We think if we can just keep it submerged, we will be free of it. But the effort of holding it down becomes its own suffering. The Buddha called this the second noble truth. Craving creates suffering. And craving does not only mean wanting, it also means not wanting. The mind that pushes away is still caught. It is still leaning into something, still using force, still burning energy to keep reality at a distance. You see this in small moments throughout the day, the itch you scratch before you even notice it, the slight hunger you cover with a snack, the silence in the conversation that you rush to fill, the thought of an upcoming task that you swipe away with distraction. Each time there is a flinch, a small no, and each no costs something. What the Zen teachers point to is this: the resistance to what is creates more suffering than the thing itself. The ache in your back is one thing. The story you tell about how it should not be there, how it is unfair, how it will ruin your day, that is another thing. The story is where the suffering multiplies. You can test this. Sit still for a moment and notice where your body feels uncomfortable. Maybe your knee is stiff, maybe your jaw is tight. Instead of shifting right away, just let it be there. Feel the sensation itself, not the thought about it. Not the wish for it to stop, just the sensation. What you may notice is that the sensation has texture, it has a location, it changes slightly from moment to moment. And when you stop resisting it, when you stop holding the beach ball under, something softens. The discomfort does not always vanish, but the suffering around it begins to ease. This is not about forcing yourself to endure pain. It is not about being tough or pretending you are fine. It is about seeing clearly that the pushing away is its own burden, and that sometimes, just sometimes, you can set that burden down. So here is something to try. Choose one small discomfort today and simply let it be present without fixing it. Not a big pain, not something urgent, just something minor. The cool air on your skin when you step outside. The slight restlessness in your legs when you sit for a few minutes. The empty feeling before a meal. The silence after someone finishes speaking. Let it stay. Do not cover it. Do not solve it. Just notice it, the way you would notice the sound of rain. You do not have to like it. You do not have to welcome it. You only have to stop pushing it away. When you do this, you may feel how much effort you usually spend. You may notice the habit of reaching for the phone, for a snack, for a distraction. You may see the small flinch that happens before you even know you are uncomfortable. And in that seeing, something loosens. The beach ball does not need to be held down. It can float on the surface. It was never the problem. The holding was the problem. This is aversion. It looks like protection, but it is a form of craving. It is the mind saying, not this. And every time the mind says that, it tightens. It divides the world into what is allowed and what must be kept away. And that division is where we exhaust ourselves. When you stop dividing, even for a moment, the suffering quiets. Not because the discomfort is gone, but because you are no longer at war with it. You are simply here. And here, without the pushing, is more spacious than you thought. There is a kind of suffering that lives so close to the surface of the mind that we stop noticing it. It hums beneath our daily thoughts, like a motor we've learned to tune out. And it begins with a simple, persistent whisper, I should be different than I am. The Buddha described 3 forms of craving. There is craving for sensual pleasure, the pull toward what feels good, tastes sweet, sounds beautiful. There is craving for existence, the desire to become something, to arrive at a better version of ourselves, to finally be the person we imagine we could be. And there is craving for non-existence, the wish to escape, to stop being what we are, to dissolve the parts of ourselves we find unbearable. Most of us recognize the first kind easily enough. We know when we want something. But the second and third forms are quieter. They live in the gap between who we are and who we think we should be. They shape our inner weather without announcing themselves. A river that insists it should be a mountain will spend its entire existence in quiet agony. It will rush and strain, trying to rise, trying to hold still, trying to become something it was never meant to be. And all the while, it is already doing what rivers do, flowing, carving, nourishing the land. But if it believes it should be otherwise, that belief becomes a weight it carries downstream. We do this. We look at ourselves and see incompleteness. We see a self that needs fixing, improving, transforming, and beneath that seeing is a craving, not for a thing, but for a different identity. We want to become the calm person, the confident person, the person who has it all figured out. Or we want to stop being the anxious one, the uncertain one, the one who always stumbles. This craving feels productive. It feels like growth, like self-awareness, like responsibility. But watch it closely. Notice what happens in the body when the thought arises. I should be more patient. I should be further along by now. I should not feel this way. There is a tightening, a subtle contraction. The breath shortens. The mind leans forward, grasping at an image of a future self or pushing away the present one. This is where suffering begins, not in the feeling itself, not in the impatience or the uncertainty, but in the belief that what is here should not be here, that you should be someone else. When you notice the thought, I should be different than I am, let it pass, not by forcing it away, not by arguing with it, just by seeing it clearly. Oh, there is that thought again. There is the familiar pull toward becoming. There is the quiet rejection of what is. The thought will come again, it always does. But each time you see it without grabbing hold, something loosens. You begin to notice that the thought is not you. It is a pattern, a habit, a wave moving through the mind. And you are the awareness that sees it. The river that insists it should be a mountain is suffering from an idea, not from being a river. It is the insistence itself, the craving to be other than it is, that creates the pain. And the moment that insistence is seen clearly, something shifts. The river does not need to become a mountain. It does not need to stop being a river. It only needs to stop believing it should be different. This is where the teaching of non-self becomes intimate. We think of the self as something solid, something that can be improved or perfected or finally made right. But look closely. Where is this self that needs to become something? Is it in the body? The body is always changing. Is it in the thoughts? Thoughts arise and pass. Is it in the feelings? Feelings move like weather. What we call the self is more like a story we tell, a collection of memories, preferences, fears and hopes stitched together into a sense of me. And craving for existence is the desire to make that story better, shinier, more complete. Craving for non-existence is the wish to tear the story apart, to escape it entirely. But the story is already changing. It has always been changing, and the one who watches the story is not caught inside it. When you sit quietly and the thought arises, I should be calmer, I should be wiser, I should be past this, let it pass. Watch where it goes. Notice how it fades if you do not feed it. Notice the space that remains when the thought is gone. You do not need to become anything. You are already here. The craving to be different is not a flaw in you. It is simply another wave in the river, and you can let it move through without mistaking it for the whole truth of who you are. There is a kind of suffering that does not announce itself with noise. It lives in the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. Between this breath and the one you wish were calmer. Between this moment and the one you are waiting to arrive. You might be sitting in a room right now, but part of you is already somewhere else. Perhaps you are thinking about what comes next. Perhaps you are replaying what came before. The body is here. The mind is standing on one shore while staring at the other. And in that space between the two, something tightens. This is craving. Not always loud, not always obvious. Sometimes it is just a gentle pull towards something different, a quiet refusal to be exactly here. The second noble truth says that suffering arises from this craving. But craving is not always about wanting more. Sometimes it is wanting less. Sometimes it is wanting things to stay the same. Sometimes it is just wanting this moment to be slightly other than it is. You can feel it in the body if you pay attention. A restlessness in the chest, a tightness in the shoulders, a sense that something is incomplete. The mind reaches forward or backward, and the body follows with a subtle tension. Suffering arises when we refuse to meet this moment as it is. Not because the moment is perfect, not because everything is fine, but because the refusal itself creates a split. You are here, but you are also trying to be there. And that division is where the suffering lives. It is like standing on one shore while staring at the other. The river is between you and where you want to be. You can see the far bank clearly. You can imagine what it will be like to stand there. But your feet are still on this side. And as long as you're looking over there, you are not fully here. The tension of that split is constant. Quiet, but constant. This is not about giving up on change. It is not about resigning yourself to difficulty. It is about seeing clearly what craving does in the moment it arises. How it pulls you out of direct contact with what is actually happening. You might notice this with small things first, the way you reach for your phone when you feel a moment of stillness, the way you glance at the clock when you are waiting, the way you shift in your seat when discomfort arises. Each of these movements is a small turning away, a small refusal to stay with what is. Craving is not always about objects. Sometimes it is about states of mind. You want to feel calm, so you push away restlessness. You want to feel clear, so you resist confusion. You want to feel present, so you judge yourself for being distracted. Each wanting creates a new layer of tension. The practice here is simple but not easy. Sit quietly and notice where your attention wants to go instead of where it is. Not to stop it, not to control it, just to see it. You might notice the mind drifting toward a plan. Let it drift and notice the drifting. You might notice a thought about something you need to do later. Let the thought be there and notice the pull of it. You might notice discomfort in the body and the immediate wish for it to change. Let the wish be there and notice how it feels. This is not about fixing anything. It is about seeing the movement of craving as it happens. The way the mind reaches, the way the body tenses, the way attention splits between what is and what you want. When you see this clearly, something begins to shift. Not because you made it shift, but because seeing itself loosens the grip. You are standing on one shore, yes? But you are no longer straining toward the other. You are simply here, noticing the river, noticing your feet on the ground. The tension does not always dissolve immediately. Sometimes it softens just a little. Sometimes it returns moments later. But each time you notice it, each time you meet it, without pushing it away, the pattern becomes clearer. You begin to see that the suffering is not in the moment itself. It is in the refusal, in the wanting things to be different, in the quiet insistence that this should not be what it is. And when that insistence relaxes, even for a breath, there is space. Not the space of having arrived somewhere better, just the space of being here, without the split. This is the teaching. Craving creates suffering because it divides you, and the division is so familiar that you might not even notice it anymore. But it is there, in the reaching, in the resisting, in the constant quiet turning away from what is. Sit with that. Let yourself feel where the wanting lives, not to make it go away, just to know it, to meet it as it is. There is a particular kind of heat we carry with us. It rises when we want something and cannot have it yet, or when we have it and fear losing it, or when we have lost it and reach backward through memory. The heat itself is simple, just wanting. But we rarely leave it simple. We add to it. We build a case for why this wanting matters, why it must be satisfied, why we are incomplete without it. This is the second truth the Buddha offered, that craving, by itself, is not the whole problem. The problem is what we do with craving, how we feed it, how we justify it, how we turn a flicker into a blaze by adding logs to a fire while complaining about the heat. You have done this. We all have. You want something, a conversation to go differently, a person to see you clearly, a feeling of safety that seems just out of reach. And almost immediately, a story arrives. The story explains. It says this: wanting is reasonable. It says you deserve this. It says that once you have it, things will finally settle. The story makes the wanting feel necessary, and so you tend the fire. You rehearse the reasons. You imagine the relief. You feed the craving with thought after thought, and the heat grows. The craving itself is not wrong. It is simply a movement of mind, a leaning toward or away. But the stories we wrap around it, those are where suffering takes root. Because the story makes the craving feel like truth. It makes it feel like the only reasonable response. And once we believe the story, we are no longer just wanting. We are clinging. We are insisting. We are caught. Consider how this happens with something small. You are waiting for a message, maybe from a friend, maybe about work. The phone does not light up. A wanting arises, simple, brief. But then the story begins. You think, they should have replied by now. You think maybe I said something wrong. You think, if they cared, they would answer. Each thought is another log. The fire builds. What began as a small discomfort becomes tension in the chest, restlessness in the body, a loop of worry that follows you through the afternoon. You are adding to it, and you are the one feeling the heat. The teaching here is not that you should stop wanting. That would be another kind of violence. The teaching is that you can notice the difference between the wanting and the story. You can see how the story amplifies, how it turns a moment of discomfort into a sustained ache, how it makes the present moment unbearable by insisting it should be otherwise. When a craving arises, there is often a small gap before the story takes over. In that gap, the craving is just sensation. A pull, a restlessness, a tightness. It has no plot, it makes no demands, it simply is. But we are so used to narrating our experience that the story rushes in almost instantly. And once it does, we forget that we are telling it. We think we are describing reality. We think the story is what is happening, but the story is what we are adding. You can begin to see this, not by stopping the stories, that is too much to ask at first, but by noticing them. When you feel the heat of craving, pause, not to judge it, not to push it away, just to notice. What is the sensation itself? Where is it in the body? And then, what is the story? What are you telling yourself about why this matters? What are you telling yourself will happen if you do not get what you want? The story will feel convincing. It always does. But if you let it sit there without feeding it, something shifts. The story begins to lose its urgency. It becomes just words, just thoughts passing through. And underneath, the craving itself, raw, simple, unadorned, becomes something you can hold without needing to act on it. You are still feeling it, but you are not adding logs to the fire. You are letting the heat be what it is without making it mean everything. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about detachment in the sense of not caring. It is about seeing clearly, about recognizing that much of what we suffer is not the wanting itself, but the weight of the reasons we give it. The justifications, the insistence that things should be different than they are. When you stop adding to the fire, the heat does not vanish immediately, but it no longer grows. It burns through what is already there, and then it settles. You will forget this. You will find yourself deep in a story before you realize you are telling it. That is fine. This is not about perfection. It is about returning, about noticing again and again the difference between wanting and the reasons for wanting, between the fire and what you are adding to it. When you can see that difference, even for a moment, you are no longer quite so caught. The craving is still there, but you are not feeding it, and that makes all the difference. There is a quiet moment just before you reach for your phone, a space between stillness and motion. In that space, something stirs. Not thought exactly, not decision, just a pull, a small current that says, check, look, find, have. This is craving. Not the loud kind that announces itself, the subtle kind that moves through you like water finding a crack. The second noble truth names this clearly. Craving is how suffering continues. Not because wanting is wrong, but because wanting pulls us forward into a future that hasn't arrived, away from the only moment we actually inhabit. You can feel this in your body if you pay attention. The slight lean forward when you want something. The tightness in your chest when you're waiting. The restlessness in your hands. Craving has texture. It moves through you as sensation before it becomes thought. A boat tethered to a dock in rough water strains against its rope. The waves push and pull. The boat lurches forward, then snaps back. Forward again. Back again. The rope holds, but the boat never rests. It's caught between the pull of the water and the anchor that keeps it from drifting away. Your mind does this. Craving is the wave. It says, if only you had that thing, that person, that outcome, then you'd be at peace. and the mind lurches forward. It chases the thought, it builds the story, it reaches. But the breath is the rope, not controlling you, not stopping you from living, just tethering you to this moment, this body, this simple fact of being alive right now. When the mind chases after 10,000 things, the Zen teachers say, return to one breath. Not because the breath is special, but because it's here. It's always here. And craving is always elsewhere. You don't have to fight craving. You don't have to shame yourself for wanting. The practice is simpler than that. When you notice craving arise, when you feel that pull, that lean, that itch, take 3 slow breaths and feel your body, not as a technique to make the craving go away, as a way of coming back, as a way of feeling the rope that holds you. Breathe in. Notice where the air enters. Notice the slight expansion in your chest or belly. Breathe out. Feel the release. Feel the small softening that happens when you let the air go. Do this 3 times, slowly, with attention. What happens is subtle. The craving doesn't vanish, but something shifts. The urgency loosens. The story that was building about what you need, about what's missing, loses a little of its grip. You're still here, still breathing, still whole, even without the thing you wanted. This is the practice, not once, not as a fix, but again and again. Whenever the pull arises, you'll notice craving more often than you expect. It's woven into the day, the urge to check your messages, the restlessness during a slow conversation, the wanting for this moment to be different, better, over. Each time, the same invitation. 3 breaths, feel your body. The boat still rocks. The water doesn't calm just because you notice it. But you begin to feel the tether. You begin to trust it. The breath brings you back, and in that return there's a kind of refuge. Not the refuge of having what you want, the refuge of not needing to be anywhere else. This is what the second noble truth offers. Not a judgment against wanting. A map. A way of seeing how craving works, how it pulls, how it creates the very restlessness it promises to solve, and underneath that seeing, a simple practice. A way back. The breath doesn't argue with craving. It doesn't try to convince you that you shouldn't want. It just waits. Patient, steady, always available. When you return to it, even for 3 breaths, you're not fixing yourself. You're remembering something. That this moment, exactly as it is enough to hold you. The boat rocks, but the rope holds. The mind reaches, but the breath brings you home. There is a moment when you want something. It might be small, a second cup of coffee, a glance at your phone, the urge to check whether someone has replied. The wanting itself is not dramatic. It arrives quietly, almost politely. But if you look closely, you can feel how it leans forward, how it reaches. This reaching is craving. Not the loud kind that disrupts your day, but the subtle kind that shapes it. The Buddha called this the second noble truth. Craving is how suffering begins. Not because wanting is wrong, but because craving never rests. It moves from object to object, always searching, always incomplete. You can see this in a candle burning. The flame consumes the wax steadily, without pause. It does not ask permission, it does not stop to consider, it simply burns. And if you keep adding wax, the flame continues. It never says, enough. It never says, I am satisfied now. Craving works the same way. It feeds on whatever you give it, and it always asks for more. The teaching is simple. See craving as it arises, see it as it persists, see it as it fades. This is not about stopping the craving or fixing yourself. It is about watching, just watching. When you notice the urge to reach for your phone, you do not have to act on it. You also do not have to push it away. You can let it be there, the way you might let a candle burn without adding more wax. You are not controlling the flame. You are simply not feeding it. This is equanimity, not indifference, not coldness. Equanimity is the capacity to be present with what arises without needing to change it. It is a steadiness that does not depend on things going your way. When craving appears, equanimity allows you to see it clearly. You notice the pull. You notice the story it tells. I need this. I will feel better if I have this. I cannot wait. And you see that these are just thoughts. They are not commands. Most of the time, we do not see craving. We only see the object. We think we want the coffee, the message, the next thing. But what we are actually feeling is the wanting itself. The restlessness, the gap between this moment and the imagined moment when we finally have what we think we need. Craving lives in that gap. It is the leaning forward, the reaching, the sense that something is missing. When you begin to watch craving, you see how often it appears. You see how automatic it is. You reach for your phone without deciding to. You open the cupboard without remembering why. You start a sentence before you know what you want to say. These are not mistakes. They are simply the momentum of craving. It has been running for a long time. It knows the pathways. It does not need your permission. But you can notice it. You can catch the moment just before you act. This is the practice. Today, choose one small craving. Not the hardest one. Not the one that feels most urgent. Just something ordinary. The urge to check your email. The impulse to eat something sweet. The wish to fill a quiet moment with sound. When it arises, pause. Do not act on it. Do not push it away. Just watch. You will feel the pull. It might feel uncomfortable. It might feel like something is unfinished. That is craving showing you its nature. It wants to move. It wants to complete itself. But you do not have to follow it. You can stay where you are, the way you might sit beside a candle and watch it burn without reaching for more wax. The flame does not need you to tend it. It will do what it does. And eventually, if you stop feeding it, it will quiet. Craving does not disappear all at once. It arises and persists. It lingers. It makes its case. But if you do not act, if you do not add fuel, it begins to fade. Not because you defeated it, but because craving cannot sustain itself without your participation. It needs you to believe it. It needs you to move. When you stay still, it loses its grip. This is not about willpower. It is not about being strong enough to resist. It is about seeing clearly. When you see craving for what it is, a pattern, a habit, a movement of mind, you are no longer caught in it. You are watching it. And in that watching, there is space. Space to choose, space to stay, space to let the moment be exactly as it is without needing it to become something else. There is a pond near where I grew up. On windy days, the surface never stops moving. Small waves chase each other across the water. Ripples collide and scatter. You can't see through to the bottom. You can't see your own reflection. The water is restless, and it shows you nothing but its own agitation. We live much of our lives like that pond in the wind. There is always something we are reaching toward. A better job, a kinder partner, a body that doesn't ache, a mind that doesn't worry. The reaching itself becomes so constant that we forget we are doing it. We think this is just what it means to be alive, to want, to move toward, to never quite arrive. The Buddha called this craving, and he said it is the root of suffering. Not desire itself, but the quality of grasping that comes with it. The way we lean into what we don't have. The way we push away what we do. The way we turn every moment into a problem that needs solving. You might notice this in small ways first. The way you check your phone, hoping for a message that will change your mood. The way you open the refrigerator without hunger, just to see if something there might fill a different kind of emptiness. The way you plan the next thing before the current thing is finished. This is not wrong. It is simply what minds do. They reach, they want. They try to secure some solid ground in a world that never stops shifting. But there is something underneath the wanting that we rarely touch. We avoid it, actually. We fear it. Because if we stop reaching, if we let the grasping go quiet, we imagine we will find nothing. A blank space, a hollow. We think the wanting is what gives our life shape, and without it, we would collapse into some kind of erasure. So we keep the wind blowing, we keep the surface moving, we stay busy with our hungers. The teaching says something different. It says that in the space where craving ends, peace is already present. Not a peace you have to build or earn. Not a peace that arrives after you fix everything. A peace that is there, underneath, like the floor of the pond. You can test this if you are willing. Sit somewhere quiet. Let your body settle. Don't try to feel peaceful. Don't try to stop wanting. Just sit and notice what happens when you are not reaching for anything. At first, the mind will offer you its usual catalogue, things to do, things to worry about, things to want. Let those thoughts come. You don't have to push them away. Just notice them, the way you would notice clouds passing. They arise, they move, they fade. And then, in the small gaps between thoughts, you might feel something else, not emptiness, not absence, but a kind of stillness that was there all along. Like the pond when the wind stops, the surface smooths, the water clears, you can see down to the stones and the silt. You can see your own face looking back. This stillness is not dramatic, it does not announce itself. It is quiet in the way that the ground is quiet under your feet, reliable, present, asking nothing of you. The craving will return, it always does. The wind picks up again, the mind starts reaching. This is not failure. This is just the nature of mind. But now you know something. You know that the peace does not depend on getting what you want. It does not depend on stopping the wanting. It is simply there, beneath the movement, waiting for you to notice. You can return to this again and again, in the middle of a busy day, in the middle of a difficult conversation, in the middle of longing or fear. You can pause even for a breath and ask, what is here when I am not reaching? Not as a way to fix anything, not as a way to become calm, just as a way to remember. The pond does not try to be still. The wind stops, and stillness is what remains. You do not try to stop craving. You simply stop feeding it for a moment, and you feel what was always underneath. The peace that does not need you to be different. The peace that is already here. There is a kind of tightness we carry that feels necessary. We believe if we relax our grip, everything we care about will slip away. So we hold on. We hold on to preferences, to outcomes, to the way we think things should be. And in that holding, we create a quiet ache that follows us through the day. The Buddha called this craving, not just wanting, but the tight demand beneath the wanting. The insistence that life must arrange itself in a particular way for us to be okay. This is the second noble truth. Craving is not the surface desire for tea or rest or company. It is the deep emotion that says, I need this to feel whole. I need that person to respond in this way. I need the afternoon to unfold without interruption. And when life does not comply, suffering arises. Not because life is wrong, but because we are gripping something that cannot be held. You can see this in the smallest moments. You send a message and wait for a reply. The waiting itself is not suffering, but notice what happens when the reply does not come. Notice the tightness in the chest, the small spiral of thoughts. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? The mind begins to construct a story, and beneath that story is a demand. This interaction must go a certain way for me to be at ease. The craving is not for the message itself. It is for control over what cannot be controlled. Or you plan a quiet evening and someone asks for your help. The request is simple, but inside there is resistance. You had shaped the evening in your mind, and now it is being reshaped by circumstance. The frustration you feel is not about the task. It is about the gap between what you wanted and what is. That gap is where craving lives. It is the space between your expectation and the world as it actually is. Imagine holding a small bird in your hands. You can feel its warmth, the quick flutter of its heartbeat. You want to keep it close because it is beautiful, because it makes you feel less alone. But the bird is not still. It shifts and presses against your palms. The tighter you hold, the more it struggles. You think you are protecting it, but you are only creating suffering for both of you. Freedom for the bird means opening your hands, and freedom for you means the same. This is what the teaching points to. The end of craving is the end of suffering. Not the end of wanting, but the end of the tight demand that life must be other than it is. Liberation does not come from arranging the world to match your preferences. It comes from releasing the insistence that it must. This is not about becoming passive. You can still care. You can still act. You can still hope for certain outcomes. But you do not wrap your peace around them. You do not make your okayness conditional on their arrival. When you open your hand, the bird may stay for a moment. It may fly. Either way, you are not diminished. You are free. The practice is simpler than it sounds. Today, approach one interaction without needing it to be different than it is. Not every interaction, just one. Maybe it is a conversation with a coworker. Maybe it is a moment with your child. Maybe it is standing in line at the store. Notice the small demand that usually arises. The wish that they would hurry, that they would understand, that they would respond with more warmth. And instead of feeding that demand, let it be there without acting on it. You are not suppressing it. You are simply not tightening around it. What you will notice is that the interaction does not collapse without your control. The other person is still themselves. The moment unfolds, and you are less burdened. This is not indifference. It is compassion turned inward. You are no longer asking yourself to carry the impossible weight of making reality conform. You are letting things be as they are, and in that letting there is ease. The bird in your hands is not yours to keep. It never was. And when you open your palms, you may feel the loss for a moment, but then you feel something else. The lightness of your own hands, the stillness that comes when you are no longer braced against the world. This is what the teaching offers, not the fulfillment of every wish, but the quiet freedom of not needing them fulfilled. The end of craving is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. It is the breath you did not know you were holding, finally released. The craving doesn't disappear just because you've seen it. This matters to understand. You might notice the tightness in your chest when someone doesn't reply to your message, and you might name it clearly as craving for reassurance, and still the tightness remains. The seeing doesn't erase the feeling, but something shifts in your relationship to it. You begin to meet craving with less surprise. When it arrives, there's a small recognition, almost like greeting someone you know. The urgency softens slightly. Not because you've mastered anything, but because you've seen this pattern enough times to know it will move through. This is what practice actually looks like. Not transcendence, but familiarity. The breath continues. The body continues. Sensations rise and fade. Thoughts form and dissolve. And somewhere in that ongoing movement, craving appears and recedes like everything else. You don't have to wait until you're free from craving to find peace. The peace is in seeing craving clearly, in letting it be what it is without adding a second layer of struggle against it. Some days you'll forget everything. You'll be completely caught in wanting, pushing, resisting. You'll only realize hours later, or maybe the next morning, that you were tangled up again. This is also part of the path. The noticing comes when it comes. You return when you return, There's no schedule for awareness, no quota to meet. What you're learning is how to be gentle with your own mind, how to watch craving move through without calling yourself weak for feeling it, how to see the pattern without shame. This gentleness is not indulgence, it's clear-eyed kindness. It sees what's happening and doesn't look away, but it also doesn't pile judgment on top of difficulty. Impermanence is working all the time, even in this. The craving that feels so solid right now will shift. The mood that seems permanent will change. Not because you force it to, but because change is the nature of conditioned things. Everything that arises passes. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to help you hold your experience more lightly. When you see that even your most persistent patterns are impermanent, something relaxes. You don't have to grip so tightly. You don't have to solve yourself completely. You can meet this moment and then the next one, and let each moment teach you what it has to teach. The work continues quietly. You sit with your breath. You notice when the mind reaches forward or pulls back. You feel the texture of wanting without immediately following it. You return to your body, to the simple fact of being here. And slowly, over time, the relationship to craving changes. It becomes less of an emergency and more of a weather pattern moving through. This is enough. You don't need to arrive at some final understanding tonight. The path unfolds through returning, through beginning again each time you notice you've wandered. There's nowhere else you need to be, but here, seeing what's actually present. If you'd like to continue exploring these teachings, there are other reflections waiting. No pressure to move forward right now. But if it serves you, the next teaching is there when you're ready. The third noble truth speaks to what happens when craving loosens its grip, when the mind begins to rest in a different way. It's a quiet teaching like this one. It doesn't promise fireworks, but it points towards something steady. For now, let yourself simply be here, the breath moving in and out, the body resting where it is. Whatever thoughts are present, let them be present. Whatever feelings are moving through, let them move. You've spent this time looking carefully at how craving works, at how suffering forms. That looking is itself a kind of freedom. The practice continues tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not because you're broken and need fixing, but because awareness deepens through returning. You're learning to meet your life with less resistance, less grasping, less fear. This happens slowly, in small moments of seeing clearly. Rest here for as long as you need. When you're ready, you'll return to your life, carrying this quiet attention with you. And that's enough.